Welcome to Late Start Advantage, where I speak with professionals who pivoted later in their careers and went on to become successful founders and business owners, proving it's never too late to start something meaningful. I'm Jacques Valencia, and today I'm joined by Mark Sturgess, founder of SE Advisory, who spent decades across energy infrastructure, local government, and leadership roles, navigating strategy, operations, people, and high-stakes disputes before making the call to start his own consultancy later in life. Hi, you can support this channel by subscribing and liking this video. Thank you very much. So Mark, thank you very much for joining me today.
Pleasure to join you, Jacques.
And tell me about yourself and where you're at the moment in life.
Advanced in terms of years and hopefully a bit of knowledge.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. So I'm currently sort of part-time running a consulting business, which I've been running for about 10 years and had a long career in the energy stroke infrastructure sort of industry. I'm at that stage now where I can mix and match and do some things apart from work as well. So I'm at a good stage in my life.
How did you come about with starting with this business in particular? Why this business and why not something else?
I think it goes back through my career where I've been very fortunate to have a whole range of different experiences within energy infrastructure and also a period in local government. So what that does, it gives you the opportunity to be exposed to different streams of activity, different work styles, different cultures. And for most of my career in different organisations, I always had a view that I'd end up running my own consulting business at some point in career. And it was a matter of getting the stars to align, I guess, and jumping in at the right time. So that was pretty much the lead in. I always sort of felt that I'd end up running some form of business and probably it was going to be in the area of consulting.
When did you start having these feelings of wanting to start creating a business?
It probably was in a period where I was involved in an entrepreneurship program in one of the organisations I worked for. I was able to go offline for a period of about 6 months to help set that up. That led me into entrepreneurship in the education sector, which exposed me to a whole range of entrepreneurs. And it was about that time when, again, I always thought, well, it's about time that I jumped in and set up my own business at some point. So that was probably the main catalyst. But I've always had a view that being sort of a growth-minded, I was always going to end up somewhere in a business, either a small business with someone else or running my own sole trader, which is what I'm doing now.
How long ago was that when you joined this entrepreneurship program?
Maybe 2005, somewhere around then. Yeah.
From 2005 to right about 2016, when you launched SE Advisory, you had those thoughts and it was just brewing in your mind.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there was always that seed there and it was a matter of, what's the appropriate time? I was very blessed in the sense that I'd started work quite young. So I had a lot of experience, a lot of different organisations that I'd worked in. And the challenge of sort of going into another corporate after my last role in corporate was a bit like, I've been there, I've done that many times. So what about trying something different? And that's advising back into industry. And having had a lot of experience and being a generalist across different activities and organisations and business streams, that sort of gives you the confidence to be able to at least enter a good conversation with people when you go and meet them, even if they're in industries where you haven't got direct experience. It's building up that confidence to be able to jump in and have those conversations, cold calling a lot of people as well. Using your network, obviously, all those things work in your favour when you get to the sort of mature age that I was able to jump into SE Advisory.
You mentioned generalist, and it's very interesting that you say that because a lot of people are specialists. They do a job and they do a very specific job and they get really, really good at the job, which is then counterintuitive to the generalist thing. What kind of message would you tell these people in particular where they want to create a business, but they're stuck in a very specific job? And as you've noticed, there's a lot of benefit to being a generalist when you start a business. So what would you tell these specialists that are really good at their job? What kind of advice or mindset shift would you give them?
It's an interesting question because sometimes the personality will suit the person in a particular, how they approach their work, if you like. But interestingly, because I do business coaching as well as part of SE Advisory, I get people referred to me regularly that are looking for business coaching and also for job placement referrals, those sorts of things, advice around that. And so what typically can happen is an individual will say, I graduated uni and I went straight into a job and I've been in that job for 5 years now, or maybe even longer. That's all I've done. And whilst I've become quite expert in that field, I can't see now broader opportunity. So my advice typically to them is, okay, be prepared to, first of all, talk to people in other industries quickly and start to explain to them that you have skills beyond what is on your CV. And so you've got to have those conversations. And then from those conversations, start to think through what opportunities could I have to move laterally, or maybe even be prepared to take a step down for a short period of time to move into another industry, to get exposure in that, sort of become more of, I guess, a generalist. So it's horses for courses. It's a lot about personality. And so that move won't suit everyone, but certainly that's advice that I give to people that are seeking the next step, the next move that's out of their comfort zone or out of their direct line of sight.
If they were to move laterally or even take a pay cut and change to another industry, for example, is there a particular role or type of role they should be prioritizing for them to get the experience, the knowledge, the network, for them to be able to use that as a means to start their business in the future?
Yeah, that's a stretching question because it'll come back to individual sort of personality, capacity to take risks, capacity to put themselves out of their comfort zone. If an individual really is serious about change, then they have to have that sort of start thinking change in the background in their mind. To take a step down or a step across, that's a person saying, I'm ready for change. I'm ready to take advice. I'm ready to do something completely different. And I'm ready to step into a little bit of the unknown for a period. A good example would be an organisation that I work for that I helped create or set up an entrepreneurship program. Interestingly, many of the young engineers that we brought into our company were very keen to move and do the Masters of Entrepreneurship. We promoted them significantly and sponsored them to go through the Masters of Innovation, which opened up their eyes to a myriad of opportunities way beyond engineering. That was one simple example. Another simple example that I've often thrown to people is that organisations that are going through change, particularly large corporates, will often have a change management function. It's sometimes set up under what's called a PMO or a project management office. And within that PMO, that project management office, there'll often be a range of different activities that you could come in and be exposed to and work in a small team and effectively vary your history by taking on another task. For example, an engineer could come in and take on a resourcing or a resource scheduling task for a period, or could come in and take a risk assurance or a safety management role for a period, or take on a strategy role or a finance role. So that's a way of breaking into a new field, but having a support network through that PMO, through that project management office. And that can often happen also within your existing organisation, because you could move laterally within your organisation, not have to move organisations necessarily.
I think some companies offer secondment, where you can talk to your manager and you can ask them, hey, I'm interested to try this.
I fully agree with that. I think often organisations are so set in their ways, they're not encouraging lateral movement. Now, several organisations I worked for, particularly when I was younger in my career, I was given the opportunity to work across as, call it almost like a cadet, sort of an early commercial person, given the opportunity to work in sales, in finance, in contract administration, in a range of activities. So all of a sudden, you're getting exposure to multiple activities and your brain starts to think quite differently because you're not locked into one area and go, that's all I'm ever going to do. And so organisations, as they become more mature, should be doing that with more senior people as well.
Do you also think that there's a benefit, even if someone is not interested in creating a business in the future or becoming a founder, do you think there's still a benefit in branching off even temporarily to another specialization? So the moment you go back, you have a broader mindset, and so you can conjure more ideas that you wouldn't have thought of if you just continued on to your specific path?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that's the opportunity. And it's a bit like also doing education beyond your normal range. All of a sudden, you should be almost every day that you're out in that environment thinking about, how can I make an improvement back into my business? I've been a big advocate for having holidays every year, because to me, the best ideas that I could ever bring back into business usually came when I was lying on the beach somewhere, and all of a sudden the light would go on and you would just jot that down because your mind is free and open. Those opportunities of bringing that experience back into your business, quite influential. Yeah.
You raise a very interesting point because I just had my first interview. He really emphasized meditation. He said that the moment he meditates is when ideas just flow in through him, because it's like there's so much in your subconscious that you don't know is there and is suppressed. And the moment you're relaxed is when they actually start surfacing. Sometimes when you go and have a holiday, you're relaxed, and that's when it's time for these ideas to start resurfacing.
Absolutely. It's a very good point you make. Organisations are pushing, many are sort of pushing programs around wellness and using meditation as one. But I think I probably have a different technique, and that is I've always had the view that to have a really meaningful life, if you can split it up into 4 or 5 segments and being able to then switch lanes on a regular basis through those segments, that's a similar thing to meditation, because what it's doing, putting you into a different stream, and therefore a different stream of thought. And it's often in those areas of those different streams where you actually, a light will go on about your core business. I always advocate, and particularly in business coaching and whatnot, so work would be typically one of those streams. Family, if you've got, family, and most have, and most are very much tied to a happy family life. So family would be the second stream. And then usually, to me, there's got to be at least 2 others, and everyone's going to be different in that. But, it could be music, it could be sport, it could be travel, it could be, creative writing, whatever. If you've got 4 or 5 streams and being able to switch into those streams, that then opens up a new set of experiences, which again, I think in my mind help your business. And I think the other thing I'd say too about, it's almost along the meditation line, is that if you're in a very, very busy job, if you can flick a switch when you leave that job, whether it's at 7 o'clock at night or whenever it is, if you can flick a switch into another stream, all of a sudden it changes your view about the day. You're doing something you're passionate about that's not work, and it just frees you up again to start the new day fresh, thinking about work the next morning rather than all night, if you know what I mean. So being able to flick those switches and have the experience outside of the day-to-day work business, to me, has been like meditation. It's been great.
So how did you culminate being able to switch through these sections or segments so seamlessly? Because for some people, it's really hard for them to do that. You hear a lot of people where they bring their work at home. Like, what kind of advice would you give to people for them to be able to successfully do this segmentation in their life?
It's a really tough question because some people simply find it so difficult, as you described. What I would do is start early. So start the day early in terms of work. And often it could be a 12-hour day in very big corporate roles. Sometimes you mightn't leave the office until 7. However, that was my sign to say, right, now switch off. Now, having said that, there's a number of jobs I've been in where I've been on call 24/7, and you're only on call if needed. And so therefore, just put your mind aside, move into something else that you're passionate about. So in a sense, it's passion that gets you out of that sort of rut, in a sense. If you're passionate about, if it's music or if it's whatever, travel or cooking or whatever, being able to switch into that mode in a way that's, you're actually looking forward to it, then it's easy to make the change. If you're totally driven by work, then it's almost impossible. If that's what you're identified by totally, it's almost impossible to let go.
I've always heard of a lot of people that say, don't make your passion your work. Do you believe in that?
Not really, no. I think work's got to be one of your passions. There's always a little sort of window there when you're switching lanes, because someone will say something in that other area that you'll go, do you know what, I could apply that to work. So you're not completely closing off, but you're relaxing your mind and taking in other things. So yes, I would hate to be just identified by work or by a career. I'd say to me that would be a failure in life. As far as you possibly can, be passionate about the job you're in. Yeah. What you may not be fully passionate about or enjoying on today, all of a sudden a conversation can open up a pathway for you to think, wow, if I was involved there, or if I could move into that industry, wow, I'm seeing the people and how there seems to be a real energy and a passion. Perhaps keeping your mind open to growth and opportunity is probably the key.
So I just want to talk about and go through your career, if that's okay with you, through your life career, because I'm pretty sure that's also something that a lot of people will be able to relate to. because they might be at that particular point in their life. And hopefully that will give people some insights on, what they can do better while they're in that work or where they can move on from there. So where did you start in your career?
Yeah, so I was fortunate, I sort of fit into the baby boomer definition category. So in the 70s, going back a long way, but in the 70s, we had great opportunities. The opportunities were education was largely government sponsored. Now, I was in that situation where I couldn't wait to get into the workforce. I didn't like secondary education. I thought it was too restrictive. It was relatively boring. I jumped straight from secondary school into working in the energy industry. And after working only probably less than 12 months there, decided to jump into part-time study. So I was able to do two sets of courses. The other part of that early career was getting these opportunities to work in different fields of business. So within the organisation I worked in, within about 3 years, I'd worked in sales, finance, fuel technology, contract administration, and there's one or two others. So at a very young age, I was exposed to these different fields of business. And probably the biggest exposure was capital works infrastructure. And this is back in the 70s where $1 billion was serious money. And so the organisation I was working for was building its infrastructure, and the scale of projects were in the order of $1 billion. And so I was given the opportunity to work in contract administration and finance around those type of projects, which was an incredible learning experience. And it meant meeting overseas operators as well who were supplying our business and negotiating things with them that, at my age was, I was very blessed to be able to have that opportunity. That led me through to a period, again, through study, probably getting interested in HR management. So I had a period where I moved into human resource management. I think, again, I have a sort of a natural inkling to work closely with people. And so I've always had an interest in people and development. So I moved into that field for a period, got a lot of exposure to industrial relations, negotiating with unions, etc., which seemed to follow me wherever I went in my career. I was approached, it was an opportunity to move into local government. And so back in that period there, the City of Melbourne, which is one of the organisations I work for, was right in the period of marketing Melbourne as an international destination. It was also at a time when we were bidding for the Olympics in Melbourne back when, just as a pre-Sydney days. But so Melbourne was really the centrepiece of the country and marketing. So I was brought in as head of organisation development, which led me to get exposure to a whole range of opportunities, including the parks and recreation functions within the city. And so I moved from a HR role into leading a parks and recreation program, I suppose, which was quite exciting at the time. From that, moved into general management at regional government, and then got approached to come back into the energy industry. But this was a time when I actually took the risk of dropping from general management role back into, I'll say, one step below general management, with a view to progressing back into the general management ranks within a certain period of time. Took that risk, the risk paid off, and had a great sort of third part of career, I suppose, or third segment of career back in the energy industry, particularly when it was going through privatisation, nationalisation. And so that opened up a whole new set of experiences working with international owners of our company, presenting to boards with international directors, opening up offices right across the national landscape. But all those things became exciting and kept me engaged and passionate. I suppose we come back to that word. That kept me passionate for quite a long period of time back in the energy industry. And that then led me to, as I said, finally saying, it's time that I sort of started my own business because of all that, I suppose, the history and exposure and networks and everything that went with it. That's probably a snapshot.
If you were to create like a summary of why being able to go through those experiences matter, what did you get from those businesses?
Yeah, so I think first of all, to go through those experiences, you've got to have an open mind to try something. So therefore, be willing to move from what might be your comfort zone across to something else that's not your comfort zone. So I think that's the first point. I think the second point is that as you start to progress through different areas, some of which don't look attractive at the time. But what you quickly learn is that you can actually still hold your own. You can still have a conversation. You can still learn as you go through those opportunities. And then that bit by bit by bit, that builds up your confidence, I suppose, to progress bit by bit by bit, to take on more senior roles. And there's probably a few life lessons in there too, and that is, it touches on your question, but there's a few life lessons, and one is treat everyone as an equal. So very quickly learn to have a conversation with a first-year graduate, but at the same time have a conversation with the chairman of the board. Treat them the same and expect them to treat you as an equal. And once you realise that, you can have a conversation with anyone, anywhere, anytime, and not feel out of your depth. So if you add to that then your experiences you pick up along the way, then it opens up your ability to have conversations around topics that, you're not an expert in, but you can at least ask questions around activities that you've touched on maybe in the past through those different experiences. I think the second key point is to be authentic, which is don't try and be someone that you're not. I've heard a lot of people in their careers, they say, I follow X guru and I aspire to be like them. I just don't get that at all. You might be able to look at someone and say, well, they've done some great things. I might pick up an idea or two from that, but I don't want to be them. I don't want to be like them. I want to be like myself, So brand's probably the wrong word. Maybe it's what is your stance on life, and stick to it, largely stick to it. So people can go, I know what I'm going to get. There'll be many times when you're challenged to pull away from that, do something that you don't feel, it's either bordering illegal or it might be overly aggressive. So you need to stick to your, stand up to bullies. It would be one example. Don't be bullied. And, there's probably one other lesson I'll throw in around customer service, and that is maybe a story that will help this one. When I was in regional, I was general manager of a regional council, and there was a major industrial dispute where the garbage collectors had gone out on strike. And so what had happened was they said, right, we're not going to pick up the garbage in the city, the CBD area. And so this dispute, it looked like going on for a period. So I went in and I was thinking, you and I and the other general managers, why don't we go out and knock on every door of every business in the street, introduce ourselves, because they never would have known us previously. Let's go and talk to them and say, we apologise for what's happening and the rubbish, and we're working very hard to try and resolve this dispute. We'll keep you updated if it's going to be an extended dispute. Now, that may sound pretty basic. For the CEO and the executives, that was like, this is Freaksville. We don't do that. But they did. They did. And they were amazed at the response that they got back from business owners who said, you know what, thanks for coming down. We were starting to get concerned. At least we now have a view about what's going on. That connection with the customer, I've seen it in so many different ways. If you can somehow, and this is going to treating them as an equal, expecting them to treat you back as an equal, those simple messages in life are really important, and very much so in business as well.
You mentioned something that was striking to me when you were talking about sticking your ground when you're getting bullied. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are employees and they are getting bullied by their employers and their managers. What is your advice with sticking through your principles if you know that you're in the right and your manager or your boss or your higher up is in the wrong, but you can't afford to lose your job because you have maybe 3 kids you have to support in your life? So what is your advice to these people?
Yeah, look, there's no one obvious solution there, because everyone's in a different situation. If you can push back very early in a relationship, by that I mean you hold your ground and you do it respectfully, then your chances are that change will occur. Now, by that I mean you'll decide, or you'll work out a way of getting around that bully, or that bully will be pulled out, because that person will eventually get caught out. And if you're in a position of being able to push back and not be dominated, then one thing, you'll feel a lot better about yourself. Others will notice it. So there's a massive opportunity for others to notice you have not given way and you've done it respectfully. And all of a sudden, people go, wow, this person, they may have some leadership capability. If possible, if there's an opportunity for secondment or whatever, there's a ways around this one current situation. Most organisations have got whistleblower programs, etc. I get the point too around the pressure on people to keep their jobs. I'm not saying that's from my experience. When someone has respectfully pushed back with good reason, they'll win in the end. Be consistent. So make sure that you're still covering all your bases in your own job and you're still performing well, doing all the hard yards, so that there's not an easy reason for that person that's perhaps applying the pressure to indiscriminately attack you. You're on good ground. Others have observed you and the way you've handled it. They'll be on your side. They'll be in your courts. I think we've all had those experiences. One thing about competitive sport, which I've been involved in right through my life, is that there's no better place than competitive sport to give you backbone to stand up to aggression, because sport is effectively, it's a win-lose situation. You win some, you lose some, so you learn to ride the bumps as well. So there's a little bit about rolling with the bumps as well as being sort of willing to sort of stand up and push back.
Yeah, you learn how to, roll with the punches, as they say.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the pushback with respect. Do you suggest people do this in the open or do it privately?
Yeah, look, again, it's going to fall back on the situation. I'll give you an example, perhaps. One of my very early days in HR in negotiating with the union was that there was a rally called of all our staff, and we actually arranged that rally to give an update on where the EBA negotiations were up to. So we organised this meeting. Unbeknownst to us, the union organisers had come in and said, we're going to be there. I said, well, it's up to you, but this is a company-arranged meeting. So we gave the team an update. There might have been 50 to 100 people in the room. It was quite a big group, working through where negotiations were up to. And, of course, at about two-thirds of our way in through that, the union organisers jumped in and started effectively attacking us on we were too slow in pretty much every angle. And so I let them go for a short period, then I stopped and said, right, let's have this out in front of the group. So then it became a little bit of them and us. When I say them and us, I mean the union vis-a-vis management. But we made sure that all the staff, in effect, equally heard both sides of the argument, and they could see that I had pushed back on sort of an aggressive approach by the union in front of everyone. That meeting concluded. The feedback for the next 2 or 3 days was people coming into my office saying, thanks for handling it the way you did, because it could have blown up. If you had have handled it badly, it could have extended negotiations on for months rather than being able to come to a resolution. So, and even the union organiser, he actually came into my office and said, I just had to do that thing publicly, but, thanks for what, So as long as you're fair and reasonable, you can get through those situations by pushing back, doing it respectfully. So it's probably an example of where that system can work. That was in a public forum, so
Yeah, 50 to 100 people is it's pretty public. Yeah, and you make a really good point. As long as you push back with respect and it's fair and reasonable, and you treat everyone as an equal, that's pretty fair. Everything that you're doing on your side is pretty fair, even if you are being treated unfairly. As long as you treat it with dignity, then at some point in time, everything should be okay. Everything should be all right.
You'll work to a solution, and things will work through. And
Based on your experience in HR in the past, are there any tips that you could give to people? How can they improve their chances of landing the job that they want? What sort of things are you looking for? And if they do land the interview, what should they be saying in the interview that will give them the highest chance possible to get the role?
The first thing I'd say is, to anyone that's putting their CV together or putting their bio together or being ready for an interview, is don't use AI. Now, that may sound, heretic to the current younger generation, but what I see a lot is CVs that are written via AI that are completely not the person that is supposedly sitting behind that CV. Really good recruiters pick it very quickly, and they're not attracted to it. Put your own CV together, put your own bio together, and I usually say a 2-paragraph bio is a lead-in. That's your elevator pitch. Do it yourself and then get others to critique it, and then smooth it, sharpen it up by testing it on others, in a sense. And even practice presenting that to, a family member or a good friend or whatever before you go anywhere near an interview or even a discussion with a recruiter. That's fairly simple to do, but virtually hardly anyone does it.
I hear the disappointment in the air of of a lot of our viewers. I think when you said don't use AI, I use AI a lot as a tool, but I do agree that if I am going to present myself to the best of my ability to someone, that using AI does create like a weird kind of gap now that I'm not presenting myself.
This goes back to one of my earlier points about being authentic, be yourself.
That's true.
Be yourself. Don't get someone else to be you. So, which AI is effectively trying to do. And again, I'm with you. AI we use every day, but in this particular space, it's all about authentic you, not someone else. It's not you. Probably then moving through to some other tips. One of the things that people often struggle with at interview in particular is diving into detail. One of the tips to me around not just being interviewed, but also leadership generally, is being able to break down complex situations and simplify them into very simple, structured comments. And so really good leaders, in my mind, are able to articulate and break down a complex situation and turn it into a quite structured and simplified version of what we need to do. Being able to summarize right up front and then have the ability to go down deeper as required, rather than automatically go, I'll keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Be drawn to go deeper by almost asking the question. I can expand on that. I can add to that if you wish, if the panel wishes. The panel will usually say, no, we're very happy. Let's move on to the next section. This sounds a bit simple, but do your research on the organisation you're going into. So if you're not within that organisation, and even if you are, go into the website, go through who is in the hierarchy, who's the CEO, who's running the different elements, different structure within the company, what major projects has that company currently got on. Do significant research about the company you're about or you're hoping you're going to join. Almost go back through the website and cut down through the key activities. Look at the annual reports. Do those sorts of basic things that I think probably most people do, but some people forget to do. Understand where the organisation is in the wave.
How would someone do that?
Yeah, so there's so many ways you can do it, and there's so much material available, whether it's on the internet, whether it's through the ASX, whether it's through reading annual reports. What do I mean by the wave? So if we look through the way industry goes, Victoria's a classic example where it's gone through, first of all, energise the state, then it's corporatise the state, then it's privatise largely most of government organisations. Then it's going through quality management. There was a period where HR management was the flavour of the month. Then it was quality management. Then it was digitisation. If you're moving into energy, then it's renewable energy. All of those have a wave. You either miss the wave or you identify that wave. And it's not that hard to do. And you work out where that organisation is likely to be in that wave. That'll give you a level of understanding of whether it's at the front end of the wave, to the bleeding edge, or whether it's already riding that wave, or whether it's a miss the wave.
Hello. Thank you very much for watching so far. Please subscribe to this channel. That's the best way to support me at the moment. And please like this video if you're enjoying the conversations thus far. Now let's continue the episode. Through your leadership experience, how would you build a good team? How do you build your Avengers?
Yeah. So let me answer that by starting way back, and that is, I think I made a comment around, if you ever get the opportunity to get into leadership, or if someone says, I think you should be a leader, that could even be, you could be a good captain of your footy team or cricket team or whatever. Grab the opportunity, because immediately, not only are you learning about leadership, but you're learning about people and you're learning about planning and structure. So that's the first point as a lead into your question around how do you build a great team. Often great teams are almost there without realising it. And so the members of that team that you want to form and create, many of them are already within your organisation, either unhappy, not motivated, about to jump ship, or a gun. So you get a whole combination of good, bad and indifferent. Importantly, you go through that process of sitting down, having conversations with those prospective team members, looking at their talent, looking at what they've done, looking at their ambitions, and then seeing how they would fit the model. So looking at what you're creating. So you're creating a team, you know what the task is broadly, and you start selling that task to each of those members before they become team members. You gauge whether they're going to be excited by that and challenged by that task and up to the task to some degree. because not everyone's at that, jump in level. And it gets down to, at the end of the day, the personal relationship that you're able to form with each of those members in bringing them in, and the respect that very quickly you can create. One, the chemistry is going to work or it doesn't. So the chemistry is a very big thing. And usually some people take a lot longer to work out people's personality type and chemistry. Others are shorter. I'm prepared to usually take a punt fairly quickly. I'll usually gauge within a few conversations. Okay, this is going to work. You've got the quals, you've got the talent. You can actually see where we're heading. It looks like the chemistry is going to work, and then go from there. It's not rocket science.
One of the challenges that a lot of people have is when they get offered this opportunity, they sort of feel like hesitant about it. And one of the reasons why is that they feel like they're not ready for it, which is then condensed in a word called imposter syndrome. So how would you beat this imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I struggle with the imposter syndrome concept, because my view would be that if someone that you trust or someone that has credibility comes to you and says, you know what, I think you should do, or I'm offering you, that person hasn't just dreamt that up in the last 5 minutes. That person's thought a lot about it before they've come to you with that opportunity. So before you dismiss it too quickly and think I'm not up to it, or why would I do that, or it's not the sort of role that I should do, I'd be suggesting never say no immediately. Always let me think about that quickly. Some will think it and then they say, yeah, I want to do it. Others might take 24 hours. Don't take a week, because by then it's lost the momentum. It comes back to someone's trusting you. Respect the trust and maybe give it a shot, It's in their interest for you to not fail. They're not going to come to you and say, what about this? Or I'm offering you this, I think you could do it. They're not going to do that if the person's going to fall flat on their face, because it's a double failure then. I've been lucky. I've had a number of people like that just push me at the right time, just nudge me. I think you should do this, push. You would be a good president. I'm going, maybe I'm not old enough. Yes, we think you would be. Bang, in you go. I remember was asked to be a chairman of an industry board, and I'd only really been on that board for a short period of time. The existing chairman came to me and said, my tenure's finished, I'm resigning. I want you to do it. And so I think, wow, okay, I'll give it a shot. But if someone you respect gives you that nudge, accept the nudge, because they've thought a lot about it. They haven't woken up this morning going, I might push Mark into this role. It's if someone comes to you with that opportunity, then respect it and think, you know what, I'm going to give that a shot. Yeah, so I was general manager of a large corporate organisation, which is internationally owned. So I'd finished that role, and we always had in the background in the back of my mind that I wanted to move into consulting, and so therefore I set up. So I'm a sole trader. I had a couple of prospective clients that I thought could get me going in that consulting business. So there was a couple of early projects I got going on, and that sort of then has just sort of moved on and on and on. And I've been fortunate that sort of there'll be a block of activity that will be in one area, and then that could move on to another area, or could be interrelated, or an organisation that brought me on something all of a sudden within that organisation suggests, what about, would you be interested in helping us in this area? In most cases, I've said yes. It's the old story. Even though I might not be an expert in some of those fields, you get the chance to move in, have the conversation, realise that you might be able to add some value, and then, one thing leads to another. For me right now, my lifestyle is the flexibility of being able to be off the corporate treadmill, but still involved with corporates in terms of advisory is great.
So far in your 10 years of running the SE Advisory Consultancy, what have you experienced so far that you didn't expect to experience going through this business that you've made?
The one area, if I come back to the question around leadership and strategy, and probably I'm adding another one, and that's bringing back to this simplifying situations. Often when you come into an organisation, within the ranks there'll be frustration and complexity, and often by coming in, you're able to very quickly identify where the tensions are, and to some degree help them understand that complexity that's around them you can help them solve their situation. And often it's identifying the 3 or 4 things that will improve their lot in life. When I say that, I mean in their business life. And also, if it's a team situation, a simple, structured plan that's not overly complex, that's achievable. I often get surprised how many organisations struggle with that or are struggling with that when you get there. To some degree, I get it because the pressures of business and the day and the politics and all of that all plays a part in over-complicating sometimes business. So probably that's a bit of a surprise. The good thing is that it's one area that I like. I like helping because very quickly you can say, look, I reckon I'm an outsider. I don't know anything, but I reckon I've seen 4 or 5 things that I reckon are clear to me that are fixable. And in most cases they go, yeah, they are. That's probably one area I'd throw in.
From your observation so far, in these multiple companies, what is the one thing that is common that if they just change that one thing, it will improve their efficiencies or optimizations in the company? Is there a one common thing?
No, I think to put your finger on one thing in all companies is too big a task. Every company, if you go back to my point around where is that company on a wave, so I'll give you a for example. So if you just pick the wave up and you're about to ride that wave as a company, you want super talented sales focused, business driving, excitement machine, risk taking. Your one idea would be around that sort of mentality. If you're at the bottom of the wave, you've run the wave and all of a sudden it's like, wow, our revenue's starting to fall, pressure's coming from competition. That then requires a completely different set of solutions because you're going to be looking at resourcing issues. You're going to be looking at maybe divesting of some business areas. You're going to be looking at some hard decisions around, change management. So if I come back to starting point about where is that company on the wave, both commercially but also in a cultural sense, to me that's where you would have to start before you would look for that magic. There's never really a silver bullet. There's usually 2 or 3 things that can help.
We've touched on this wave a lot. Is it okay if you explain the wave to us?
Yeah, so if I touch on the young generation now, just entering the workforce, etc., they've all grown up in a digital age. When we started, or in my early career, email didn't exist. Computers were bigger than floor in a building. And everything was punch cards. Mobile phones didn't exist. Education was driven largely out of the US by, I'll call them education gurus. These were like the rock stars of the music industry. They would come to Australia, they would fill stadiums, and people would hang off almost every. So that was called that was that education wave. And many of them were extremely good. So I'm not dismissing them. In many cases, you would follow their leads. And so their expertise was in things like strategy, was in innovation, new styles of workforce. All those things were quite revolutionary. We then went through, I talk about the next few waves of corporate business. Privatisation in Australia of major corporates, previously government owned. So that's a wave in itself, incredible opportunities. And then you would go through things like quality management became an industry in itself. You had to be quality compliant across so many different areas. The HR had its own. HR went from personnel administration into human resource management, people and culture. So that in itself was another wave, incredible wave of. You could get on that. If you could get into that wave and you enjoyed it and you were good at it, it was a great ride. And then we moved through all the all the changes that have come through technology. Each of those carry another wave to the point now where, rightly or wrongly, the tech giants are sort of driving the world. And the question is, what does that mean for us all? What wave has it created? Where are the opportunities? In your case, Jacques, well done, because you've at least, you're starting a business in at least a wave that has high potential, high value, chasing a wave, looking for the wave, doing research before that wave crashes you and it's too late. Doing a bit more reading and research and searching out what's the next thing. How do I get in? Do I get in at the early time of that, or do I wait for it to be finished and it's too late? The opportunity's gone. That's what I mean by the wave.
This might be a very broad question, but I'd be really interested to see what you think about it. Like, luck is a very important part in all of this, in founding a business, in having a new job. Is there a way for you to develop luck from your experience?
I think there's a lot of cliches around luck, isn't there? Around you make your
Mm.
own luck and all those things. The harder you work, the luckier you get, all those cliches. But I think I would describe it more like if you're positive generally in life, you seek to be positive and you throw yourself into each of those four areas. Then I describe the four areas of there's four streams. In each of those, if you are passionate and positive, then good things happen. Now, whether you call that luck or not is another thing. I think it's more like good things happen. If you seek positive outcomes, good things happen. Not always the ones you think will occur. Another way to describe it too is there's a great saying around never waste a crisis.
Never waste a crisis. Can you expand on that?
So what it's implying is that crises, if you like, hit us all at different points in our life. Some of them are work-related, some of them are personal-related, family-related, etc. So out of that crisis, if you can, one, manage it to a point where you can derive some positives out of it, then you might say, well, you've just turned bad luck into good luck. I think all of us, people listening to your podcast and you yourself, Jacques, will have had times where you thought, gee whiz, I think that's the end of the world almost. How am I going to get through this? You work your way through it, and then from it, something positive comes out of it. Something just pops out the side and you go, wow. So you haven't wasted the crisis. What goes with that also is another saying that I regularly hear: never waste a friend.
Never waste a friend.
So friends are there for you to help, and there to help you. It's amazing how sometimes when that crisis occurs, your friends jump in to back you up and help you. These might be business colleagues. They might be, if it's out of work, then it's family and friends sort of thing. So those two things are quite compelling when you think about never waste a crisis. I've had plenty of experiences in business where we've gone into crisis. And so how do you not waste it? Well, you don't waste it by you get your management team engaged in helping solve and work through the crisis. From that, there'll be definite wins. Number one, you've got yourself through the crisis. That's a win in its own right. And then from that, individuals will have stood up to the challenge. They'll have gained, they'll have grown, they'll have understood that when your back's to the wall, you can come out a winner. And I think that to entrepreneurs starting new businesses, there'll be many crises that occur, and how do you work your way through that, and how do you not waste that opportunity of learning? Sort of brings us back to that question of luck. So if you don't waste that crisis, then you're turning effectively bad luck, in theory, into good luck, even if it's only a small part of it. But you're not wasting you haven't dismissed it as a crisis. You've actually said, no, we've grown from that, or we've learned from that, or we've developed some new skill. It might be risk management, or it might be disaster management. Whatever that new skill is, it's a plus. You haven't wasted the crisis.
I have here some hypotheticals. If you were to start your business that you've built for the past 10 years over again from scratch, knowing what you know, how would you do it differently?
Not a lot, except that I can be more emotionally driven and reactive than maybe hard-nosed commercially driven, with a couple of, I'll call them anchor clients or transition clients.
You mentioned something about commercially hard-nosed. Is that right?
Let's say you're in a dispute and it may simply be, do you know what? My emotions are driving this discussion rather than thinking this tactically through to a better commercial outcome. Having said that, the qualifier is that most of my career I've tended to get a reasonable balance between the emotional side and the commercial side. But I think in jumping into a new venture, like say starting a business, I think you're more passionate. Your passion probably overtakes your commercial thinking for a short period of time. If you're about to invest a serious amount of capital into a new venture, for example, then you would want more of the commercial side to be balancing the emotional side, I suppose, is another way of describing what I've just said.
If you don't have any business at the moment, but you have the current knowledge, the network, the experience, and all of that, and you have $10,000 to start a business, what would you do?
You'd need a bit more than 10,000.
Yeah. So what if you only have 10,000? What would you do with it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably establish some form of online trading platform. Any sort of retail trading. It could be retail, it could be advisory, it could be, so I'm not talking about financial advisory, I'm talking about just online trading. It could be selling records, it could be providing creative designs for whatever. There's high competition, but the barrier to entry is low. So it's a bit like what you're doing now. You're jumping into an area where there's enormous competition, but your barriers of entry are still letting you in. And if you do it well, you'll still be able to grow that business. So what you're doing is smart.
So the next stage of this hypothetical, 100,000 US dollars, which is 140 Australian dollars, to start a business with all the knowledge, experience, network, what would you start?
I'd expand the consulting business to a collegiate of senior consulting advisors that are willing to work as a cooperative.
If you had $100,000, you would start this consultancy, but then straight away create those line of trusted advisors. So then you would be able to create tremendous value.
That's right, because you're able then to market a talent pool that already has respect from the industry. They're mature operators in the sense that they'll already have a network and contacts and they have a track record. And so therefore the marketing side of it becomes organic. Individually, they don't have expectations of earning X amount. They're simply there in the collegiate as an opportunity for them to be engaged and to earn whatever they want to earn or they can earn. But it's bringing in that collegiate of people. It brings connection, it brings engagement, it brings wide experience, it brings cultural differences, gender balance, all those things all of a sudden you've got. And the expectations of people are not that I have to survive in this business to pay the mortgage tomorrow.
And you can probably guess what the next stage of that amount would be, which is you have $1 million to start a business, or 1.4 million Australian dollars with no current business at the moment, but you have all your resources, network, skills. What would you start?
Simple. The obvious answer would be to expand on the previous comment to make it a national sort of collegiate that requires some infrastructure in each state and perhaps even international. There's got to be something more. Because I'm a music enthusiast at my stage of career and life, etc. So if it was altruistic, it could deliver something that could counter the negative impact of AI. For all those up-and-coming talented musicians that are currently missing out on opportunities for the reason of AI and YouTube and everything else, it's pretty much taken away. There's a guy playing on the weekend. I actually hadn't heard of him. He's an American sort of blues player. He goes to a country and he forms his own band in each of the countries he plays in, through his network. But what that showed me was, whilst it was altruistic, it was also commercially smart. He couldn't afford to tour the band, but he could afford to play solo. But he decided, no, I'll do it with a band. I'll get a better outcome, and I'm giving those local musicians experience and probably some revenue or something for their time. So that's not revolutionary, I know, but that's at least trying to help a segment of young players that potentially are going to be cut out of their passion.
Yeah, some kind of nomad musicians.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. That's cool.
The talent of some of these young musicians is so good that they're into this band. Within a gig, they're swinging. They could have been there for 10 years sort of thing. Wow, this is talent.
So we're coming to the end of this interview. If there's one message that you can give to people who are starting their businesses or thinking of starting their businesses because they're in that fork in their life, what would be the one message you would give them?
There's a few little comments that I'd make, and it's probably around, is it the right time in your life? For me, it was the right time because I'd already had a long career and I had the appropriate backing to not have to worry about, if this doesn't work day one, how am I going to pay the mortgage? So I was taking less risk to effectively move into the next phase. People will make a judgment around how much risk they're prepared to take. Is it at the right stage of their lives to do that? And in many cases, the answer will be they're straight in. They've already, they've worked it out. They've got backers. They're clear about their pathway, etc. Others will be less sure, and so be weighing it up with family responsibilities and mortgages and school fees and all those things. So timing is everything. Getting the balance between passion and commercial reality would be the second part of that.
I think there's a lot there that people can get value out of. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, Jacques, and I wish you all the best with your venture and business as well. So thanks for having me involved.